I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today we meet Laura Stack and learn about her quest to understand what happened to her son, Johnny. How does a good child, a straight-A student, seemingly on track for a happy, successful life, get swept up by psychoses, mental health issues, and ultimately suicide? Well, Johnny met marijuana, and what happened is the topic of Laura's new book, The Dangerous Truth About Today's Marijuana. Laura, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you here today.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, well, what brings me here is exactly what you mentioned in your introduction, my son, Johnny, who sadly died by suicide at the age of 19 after he became psychotic from dabbing high-potency marijuana concentrates here in Colorado. And we can certainly talk about the word dabbing if people are not familiar with that. But he started using marijuana when he was 14. He came home from a high school party and told me that his friend had an older brother who was 18 at the time, and he had a medical marijuana card, and he had marijuana there at the party, and they all wanted to try to get high. And so he used it. So in Colorado, it was legalized recreationally in 2012. And so Johnny was 12 years old then. And in 2014, when he was a freshman in high school, it really became available and accessible. So before he used, he was, like so many kids that you would know, happy, funny, involved, busy. He played the piano, he played guitar, he ran cross country. He was a brown belt in karate, very intelligent. He had a 4.0 GPA all through high school until the very last semester of his senior year. He had a scholarship to Colorado State University, had his whole life ahead of him, Peter, until he found marijuana.
You know, a theme here that is really frightening, but unfortunately frightening for us after the fact, we didn't see it coming, was that legalized and normalized are two completely different words. I mean, alcohol is legal, but illegal under 21 years of age. It seems like those teenagers, the legal line isn't as dangerous as the normalized line, where they feel it's okay to do it, that somehow, because it's legal for somebody at any age, that they should have a right to do it. What is it like in Colorado when you have young kids that you're trying to impress to be careful, but you see all this advertising and marketing that really talks about everything but being careful?
Yes, the marijuana industry, of course, wants to addict our children because it is an addiction for profit industry. They need more people to be hooked on marijuana so that they can make money. So there is a lot of manipulation that goes on here, and ease of access in a way that alcohol and tobacco are not. It's very difficult actually for a youth to get alcohol until they're 21. I mean, they are very strict here in Colorado about carding, and they have blue lights and they know how to identify fake IDs. It's very hard to get alcohol until you're 21. It's also hard to get cigarettes, tobacco, vape. They card heavily at our gas stations to buy that, because there's a lot of operations trying to catch them selling to minors. But the trick is in Colorado that you don't have to be 21. You only have to be 18. And there are a lot of criminal doctors who we call the pot shop docs for several $100s that any 18-year-old can go and see. And they lie. Basically, they make up some sort of medical malady. And within a few minutes, they pay their few $100s, and they are now the proud owner of a medical marijuana card. There are over 4,000 medical marijuana cards for 18-year-olds in Colorado that do not have chronic or debilitating conditions. So they say they have a migraine, they say they have a backache, something that can't be proven. And then they can legally at 18 go into the dispensaries and buy these incredibly potent products, shatter, wax, stab, whatever they want. And then unfortunately, they take it back to their high schools, and our middle schools, 1 in 10 of our middle schoolers is using here in Colorado, and sell it back to them. Now that of course is illegal. It's often referred to as the gray market because it's not the black market. It's not people illegally growing in their homes or dispensaries giving underage kids marijuana and not carding them. These are legally purchased marijuana cards given to them improperly by a doctor. So that's really what the big problem is here. If you go to a concert here in Denver, there'll be a trailer, and on one side there'll be a big RX for the doctor. You go pay and get your card if you're 18. And then on the other side of the trailer is the medical dispensary where you buy it, and then you share it with your friends who are 17 and 16.
Well, we're going to take a short break and take a look at that because I think every parent needs to know the kind of risks inherent in this behavior. We'll take a short break, continue our conversation with Laura. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this.
The black truck? Hey, Christina from accounting.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, I used to date a girl named Christina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then she dumped me for my best friend. You want to see some photos of them that I took?
I don't.
I thought we talked about this, buddy.
Buzzed and overshared again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna call a car.
That's a smart idea.
So yeah, I know, that's why I did it.
Hey, you're gonna get back to the top of the mountain.
Does that mean I'm gonna get back with Christina?
No.
Oh.
No.
Today, more than ever, you need fast, reliable internet. At Mediacom, we want you to know you can count on us. Our fiber-powered 100% gigabit technology network was built for the future. We have enormous capacity and power and 99.99% network reliability. So even though these are uncertain times, we're prepared. And you can be certain we'll keep your world connected.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and we're talking with Laura Stack about her story as a mother trying to understand how the marijuana industry can function very much like a predator in the fog of deception, misinformation, and put children at risk. She knows the science and mental health risks of marijuana use, and she has dedicated her life to help parents protect their children. You know, Laura, this protecting children thing, it sounds like, one, these medical cards to 18-year-olds are more like a license to sell and distribute marijuana than they are any valid medical use. And secondly, an 18-year-old is often living at home with parents. They can go get a medical card and buy and traffic in marijuana without any ability of the parent to be able to intervene?
That's correct. You are 18, you are an adult. It doesn't matter to the state if you are living at home. It doesn't matter if you are still financially responsible for your child. The Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment actively protects these doctors who are issuing these recommendations, because remember, that's not a prescription. It's not an FDA approved version of medical marijuana. It's a sham, really. And so as soon as your kid turns 18, you lose control. We did not know Johnny had a medical marijuana card. We didn't even find out that he had one until he died, because we got access to his computer and we were able to see the login at that point from the CDPHE. You lose control of your child's school records. He took us off of his parent portal so that we couldn't see that he wasn't going to school. We couldn't see that he would leave the house and then never go to school.
And that's in high school.
High school, yeah. And seniors are 18 and they're still living at home. And he called his doctor and his psychologist and said, you can't release any more information to my parents. So The bottom line is you have to intervene before your child turns into an adult, because at that point you lose all power. 14, 15, 16, 17, these are the very, very crucial, vulnerable ages that you have to seek intervention if you find out that your child is using.
There's the great point there, because when you have great kids, no matter what you've done, it's the drug that takes over their brain. I mean, that the drug creates the problems. The drug turns a child, into somewhat, paranoid. They want their parents out of their life and everything else, but this is not their basic nature.
No.
You've had some experience looking at how the drug actually changes the behavior. What would you
Yes.
share with parents?
Well, Johnny was a victim. I mean, he should have never had access to this in the first place. And it's not, I want everybody to understand, we didn't allow it. We don't use it. We didn't know for the most part. There were a couple of things that we've discovered, and it's very easy to hide. It has no smell. And we did everything that any parent would do in the 5 years that he started until he died, in the way of treatments and programs and hospitals and medications and doctors and interventions and, everything that you can think of, we did too, but like you said, he wasn't a bad kid. He just made poor choices, and all of the protective factors that people talk about, get your kid involved in activities and make sure they get good grades. Parents will say, well, that would never happen to my kid because my kid has straight A's. Well, so did mine. He had a perfect SAT score in math, 800 out of 800. Well, that would never happen to my kid because, we go to church. Well, my son loved Jesus too. He volunteered at Sunday school with us. He had a heart for the homeless, a very servant-minded young man, and they still can be addicted to drugs. So we have to be careful about how we look at this marijuana, because there are some people medically with rare seizure disorders, for example, who use it, but it's never dabbed, it's never smoked, it's never vaped, right? There are no scientific studies that show any benefit for the high potency products of marijuana today on adolescent health. None, zero. Instead, what we see is how marijuana negatively impacts them. In my son's case, he had a psychotic break and thought that the mob was after him. He thought that the University of Northern Colorado was an FBI base. He said that his dorm room was bugged and that everybody knew everything about him. And he also hurtfully accused my husband and I of being in on it. Now, in on what? He never could exactly explain, but he thought that the Patriot Act was made for him, because of him, because people were so interested in his life and who he was. And you hear your child saying things like this and whoa, they have completely gone off the deep end. And until recently, many people had never heard of cannabis-induced psychosis. They were wrongly diagnosed with things such as bipolar, schizophrenia, when in fact, when the cannabis is withdrawn and the brain is allowed to heal, those symptoms of those mental illnesses can actually go away.
Well, we're going to take a short break. Before, I want everybody to see this book. You run this wonderful book, The Dangerous Truth About Today's Marijuana, that really details the story. I highly recommend it. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to take a closer look at Johnny's ambassadors and the amazing job that they do to raise the alarm of the risks of marijuana. See you all after the break. You don't want to miss this.
Today, more than ever, you need fast, reliable internet. At Mediacom, we want you to know you can count on us. Our fiber-powered 100% gigabit technology network was built for the future. We have enormous capacity and power and 99.99% network reliability. So even though these are uncertain times, we're prepared. And you can be certain we'll keep your world connected.
Multiple studies have shown that marijuana can slow both driver reaction and response time, which can be really dangerous. He's here. He's here. Wait. What? I can't drive. Why? My. Oh.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking with Laura Stack, author of The Dangerous Truth About Today's Marijuana and founder of Johnny's Ambassadors. Laura, tell us about Johnny's Ambassadors and how it's really working to take this, your son's legacy, and turn it into something really positive.
Thank you. I'd love the opportunity to talk about what we're doing after Johnny passed. I basically was in bed in a fetal position for several months after that. And then I got really angry, and I did a Facebook post, and I just said, has anyone ever heard of dabbing? And I put some links for some research about the harms for youth, and it got 20,000 shares. It was absolutely unbelievable, and 3,000 comments, and most of them were, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never heard of dabbing. And I knew that I had struck a nerve, and I decided right then that I would educate people about what happened to my son, because when Johnny told me he was using marijuana, in the back of my head, I remember saying to myself, oh, well, it's just weed, right? I used marijuana when I was a kid, and I'm fine, right? And I couldn't have been more wrong. I had the concept of the old marijuana from the 60s, the 70s, 80s, 90s into the early 2000s, not the very potent varieties that we are dealing with today, and certainly not the concentrates, which didn't even really exist until about 2015 commercially. So I knew that if this can happen to me, an educated person, living in a beautiful suburb in South Denver, I mean, it can happen to anyone's family, just like us, ordinary people that don't understand the difference. And so we formed a nonprofit. Johnny's Ambassadors is a 501c3, and we are dedicated to educating parents and teens about the dangers of youth marijuana use, particularly as it relates to brain development and mental illness, and sadly, a 7-fold increase in suicide that we see in youth who use marijuana. Suicide is now the #1 cause of death in Colorado, youth ages 15 through 19, and 51% of them have THC in their toxicology reports, not alcohol, THC. So we have a big problem here, and we are committed to providing tools, resources, seminars, videos, graphics. People can become a volunteer trainer and bring our curriculum into their community and teach those that they love to.
Yeah, there are two factors here that we see very often, and you pointed them out. One is that the potency drives addiction at a really high rate.
Yes.
And can end run the common sense aspect of making good sound decisions. Once you take real high potency drugs, your brain can be taken over. The other thing is that kids are not stupid. Just because they don't know the risks doesn't mean that makes them dumb. It means they don't know the risks, and educating them to the risks makes them act more sensibly. I mean, we know that from a parental point of view and publicly, if there's a perception of risk, the child is less likely to engage. Now, the industry, if you look at their ads, does everything in their power not only to say it's not risky, but it's cool, and you can be a movie star, and you can be everything else. Now, that's a huge mountain for a parent to climb. How do you grab back their attention from all of that glitz and glamour they put on this product?
Well, you teach them. You teach them about neuroscience. You show them what happens in a brain using MRIs and the scientific studies that are out there that shows them that when THC enters the brain, of a young person before they are 25 years old, which is when their brain stops forming. You show them the structural changes and the brain damage that happens to their minds. We can actually show, for example, that the prefrontal cortex, where they make decisions, is thinner in youth who use marijuana. We can prove declines in IQ. If you were an A student and you use, now you're going to be a C student. We can prove that it causes memory loss. We know that it causes laziness and amotivational syndrome and poorer outcomes in life. It causes sleepiness. It causes anxiety. It makes depression worse. We know that it can create a lot of paranoia and delusional thinking like Johnny had. So they just have to understand the science behind marijuana and why it's so bad for them.
You know, and something else is true too, because this is something relatively new on the market and caught a lot of us by surprise. And it's brave parents like you that share the story. And so people can learn from what other people have gone through. 8 years ago, you didn't have that opportunity when they first legalized and did medical, because nobody knew what it really was or how dangerous it was.
Exactly.
So, you know, your bravery really makes itself known. And we're going to ask you to come back after the break to share some final comments and insights, things you've learned from your experience. Stay tuned, all of you. You don't want to miss this. See you after the break.
Every second, 127 new devices connect to the internet. You can feel it happening. Our digital world expanding with every breath. We're entering a whole new era of connectivity, and MediaCom will be ready to power it with one of the nation's first 10G platforms. We'll be bringing you more speed, more capacity, more security, and the power to do more than you ever dreamed possible.
Whether it's advice on managing your anxiety or tools to help you stay grounded, Coping-19 provides a range of resources and self-care tips to help you cope with this pandemic. We can help. Find the resources that work best for you at coping-19.org.
Welcome back. Today on Surviving Bad, we're talking about the dangerous mental health risks associated with marijuana use and how the nonprofit Johnny's Ambassadors is turning the tragedy of her son's suicide into a legacy of hope and inspiration. Let's hear what lessons Laura has to share. Laura, what are some of the things, if you think back, if you could go back in time, how would you equip parents today with what you know?
Wow. Well, first, I would equip them with knowledge. I would teach them what concentrates are and why the plant matter has been removed from marijuana, because many of us have the old mindset of taking a paper and rolling some grass and smoking a joint. And now there are no plants. They are just the chemical properties of the THC, which is the psychoactive part of marijuana. And the botanists also have made the flower potent. In Colorado, 30% THC marijuana is not uncommon to smoke just with the bud. So I would first have them understand why the product is so different. And we're comparing apples and oranges when they were a kid until now. And then secondly, I would have them take charge. If we could have sent Johnny away, we had some signs when he was 17, and looking back, knowing what I know now, having to do it over again, we would have sent him to a long-term rehabilitation hospital when we first understood that he was addicted, before he turned 18, before we lost our last chance of being in control and getting him help. So I would tell parents, intervene early, and that you're not trying to be their friend. You know,
and reading your book, it was obvious early on that Johnny did reach out often to you for help.
Yes.
And you did try to give them help, but as you said,
All
that
the
long-term
time.
thing. Yeah, of course, you were fantastic parents, and how you suffered through this. Looking back at it is a phenomenal story for people to read. It seems to me that the marijuana use and the world, as it conspires to take over kids after the age of 18, drives a huge wedge between children and parents. That they target that relationship, and you made an important point. Before they're 18, it sounds like it's critical that parents take control of any signs they see of a problem before they can't do anything anymore.
I think a lot of parents are tired by the time their kid hits 18. And it's really important when they're 13, 14, 15, and you're trying to give them a little more independence to not completely let go of the reins, to still understand where are they going, who are they with, to have contact information, to understand who the parents are, to know who their children are hanging out with. I think we put a lot more trust in our kids than they're ready for. And they're made to be risk takers. That's how they're wired. That's evolution. They're supposed to need to be able to live independently, but they're still making poor decisions. And because of a lot of the false messaging and narrative that they hear, they think it's safe, it's natural, it's harmless. Let's just get high. It's fun. And the first time someone says, "Here, hit this," at a party, they need to have heard from you why it's dangerous, why you don't allow it, what your boundaries are. And we know from research that if a parent disapproves, they are less likely to use it. And let them throw you under the bus. Just say, my mom drug tests me, can't, whatever excuse you have to make up. Help them state their boundaries early and make sure that they're prepared when they first are offered marijuana.
Well, thank you so very much for joining us today. And for those of you watching, go to Johnny's Ambassadors website, learn something from what Laura's been through and her husband's been through, and what Johnny has given to you as a lesson to help you get through life safely. Thank you all for joining us today. Check out our website, ahealthyiowa.org, for more information, and keep your eye on MediaCom MC22 for our next episode of Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration on MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.